Hello, my name is Richard Corbett from emergebydesign.net, and welcome to my weekly human design and astrology forecast, starting on Monday, February 17th through Sunday, February 23rd. Now, before I pull the chart up, I do want to announce that at Emerge by Design, my partner Brandy Jordan and I are accepting signups for our new course called Awaken. This is a foundation human design and astrology course of embodiment. And it will include an IHDS certification for living your design, but it's also going to be much more than that. You know, when we first learn about human design, it's a very intellectual process. We begin to learn the language and the concepts and the names of the energetic centers. But the key is that we bring it into our body to really fully embody and live it out and be able to listen to our body. So in this course, Brandy will be sharing many somatic tips and tools to help do that. There'll be guided meditations into your centers. We will have deep, practical discussions about what does it look like, what does it sound like, and how do I know the signposts when I see them. Together, we've been sharing this with clients for over 30 years, and we're going to bring everything that we've learned over those years of experience into this course. So I'll put a link in the description. If this interests you, please check it out. We'd love to see you there. Okay, let's pull the chart up and see where we are for this week and what symbolism we may be able to draw from what's happening in the sky. Okay, so here is the chart for Monday, February 17th. As a reminder, my charts are always run for noon Mountain Time, except for the lunations. Now, this week, we are going to be having our third quarter moon of this lunar cycle on Thursday, and we're also going to get to see Mars finally turn forward after its retrograde phase on Sunday evening. Mars has been in retrograde since December 6th. And he only goes in retrograde about every 2 years. So it's always quite significant to see what's happening. I have been talking about this in some of my earlier reports, but we're at an important juncture of the phase right now. So we'll get to that in just a moment. First thing I want to do is just orient us towards the chart. We can see that the sun is still in gate 30, line 6, putting the Earth in its polarity in gate 29, line 6. The sun is about to move into Pisces, and that actually happens in this line 6 of gate 30. It's in the final 7 minutes and 30 seconds, so it's at the very end of the line when we make this transition. But we can see that Mercury, Saturn, the North Node are all there in Pisces, and for the rest of the week starting tomorrow, we'll have the sun there as well. Most of the sign of Pisces has solar plexus center gates. And that's why, as we look at the body graph, look at the solar plexus this week. My goodness, that is a lot of activations. So a couple things we might say about the upcoming week. It's a lot of Piscean, watery energy. It's a lot of activations in the center of emotional feeling. So there's a tremendous emotional current this week. We have this entire experiential stream from gate 40 up through 30, 36, and 35 with Jupiter in gate 35, and Jupiter is moving forward as well now after having done its retrograde phase in gate 35. In other words, Jupiter went through gate 35, turned and went backward through gate 35, and is now moving forward through gate 35 the third time. So this planet of abundance and expansion is moving forward, traversing this part of the wheel for the third time in the gate of progress, in the channel of transitoriness. We have the North Node in gate 36 and the South Node in gate 6. We'll be having those activations for over 2 months to go still. But it's really emphasizing with this Jupiter movement that there may be some development in our emotional wisdom and our sharings with each other. So that's something to keep an eye on. But again, just to say, as we outline the week here, a strong emotional current. You know, we started this lunar cycle with a new moon in gate 19. The pressure to need the emotional support from each other and to offer our emotional support. And then 2 weeks later, we had the full moon was in gate 4 and the sun was in gate 49. So we had this entire channel in working itself out in the transit field for the first half of this lunar cycle. So if you've had any experiences in your intimate emotional connections, this would be par for the course right now. We've been offered this opportunity to see how we're dealing with that, how we're sharing our emotions back and forth. Possible looking at elevated communication could be necessary during this time, and looking at our boundaries. Where is my personal autonomy and sovereignty, and how does that meet up against my partner? What's theirs and what's mine? And how do we work together to evolve in our committed relationships, which is part of what that whole archetype of the channel of synthesis is about, being sensitive to the needs of each other. So, yeah, the sun moving through that gate 30 will be moving into gate 55 tomorrow. And just want to emphasize as we start the week that this will be a wonderful week to really observe, to be aware, to notice what we're dealing with on the emotional plane with each other, and how to deeply connect with our own personal authority. Everyone on the planet is going to be given a defined solar plexus from these transits. So we're going to see this out there in the public world of these emotional flares happening here and there. But it's an opportunity, particularly for people that have an undefined solar plexus in your chart. There's a lot of stimulation out there, and that is an opportunity to stand firm and grounded in whatever center is your inner authority, or if you're a mental projector or a reflector, what your process is on connecting with authority, so that we can observe what's happening and follow our authority to interact or not. Let's go ahead and chart into Tuesday. And on Tuesday, February 18th, the sun moves into gate 55. This is called the gate of abundance. Emotional spirit. It's right here in the solar plexus. It's part of our individual circuitry. So it's very deep inner recess of this personal experience about emotional spirit. It's an emotional channel itself. It speaks to the idea that sometimes we feel emotionally abundant, my cup is full, and at other times the pulse has gone and we can feel that our emotional cup is empty. It's also significant because we have Saturn that's still in Pisces and moving forward now in gate 22, the other emotional individual gate in this stream. And so Saturn is doing its restructuring to this concept of my emotional expression in group interaction. And there's more to this story I want to talk about because Mars has been trining Saturn in the wheel and about to turn forward. And so this is a developing story right now. In fact, we are always within a pattern, within a pattern, within a pattern. And there's some big ones at play right now. So I'm looking at this in terms of we're in the middle of some of these stories. It may not be for a month or two as we move forward in time when some of these things get resolved, but we are reaching an inflection point with Mars turning forward on Sunday. So I'll get back to more of that shortly. Also want to note that the Earth and its polarity from gate 55 is in gate 59. So we can see as of Tuesday, we're also getting the channel of mating, a design focused on reproduction. Okay, so we started out the lunar cycle with the channel of sensitivity, and now for this week, we're also going to be getting the channel of mating. So again, our emotional connection with others is in the air right now. Anything that we're experiencing is offering us an invitation to understand this better. What's going on in our relationships? How are we supporting our own self-nourishment in that? And how are we supporting the other? So this solar plexus, as I continue to look at it here, we can see it's just loaded up right now with developing stories regarding emotional connections with others. Now, the other thing happening on Tuesday, the moon is moving through Scorpio. And as she moves through Scorpio, it takes about 2.5 days for the moon to go through an astrological sign. She will be trining all of these planets in Pisces, and that includes the sun now. Once the sun got into gate 55, line 1, he's in Pisces. And so again, we're just feeling this possibly turbulent. It's like the ocean, right? With Pisces, there's tides and the pull of the moon, and we're moving towards the third quarter moon. And so it's just a watery world right now. But it's also a really beneficial time to connect with our sense of creativity, spirituality, mysticism. And we may want to call on all of those tools as we navigate this watery emotional world of the solar plexus. Also on Tuesday, I see that Venus here in Aries in gate 17 is forming a semi-square with Uranus. A semi-square, a half square, is very similar to a square. It can be a little bit agitating. Squares denote a frictional, dynamic energy that is seeking resolution. And so Venus moving through Aries, she's as far from her home in Libra on the other side of the wheel that she can get. So she's a little challenged here. Venus loves love, beauty, harmony, and balance. And so this sign of Aries with its Martian physical aggression can be a little uncomfortable here. So Venus can be a little spicy in Aries, and she's currently in gate 17, the gate and archetype of opinions, logical opinions, and in a half square to Uranus in gate 23, line 5. Now, Uranus in 23 line 5 is significant because Uranus did his forward movement and then retrograde phase, came back to 23 line 5, has stationed and recently turned forward. And wherever that station turns forward at is significant. So we have the planet of shock, unusual, um, it could mean anything. It's like a wild card to planet Uranus in this gate of assimilation. This is an individual throat expression concerning our personal truth, inspiration. And here, Venus having this half square, it's like, well, I've got all this emotional activity going on in my relationships, and Venus can get irritated, a little volatile here. So just to be mindful on Tuesday that that semi-squares might be providing a little agitation to these conversations that may be very important right now as Mars is slowing down in this retrograde movement. He's moving very slow this week. As I mentioned, he'll be turning forward just on Sunday. So he's really holding space right now in gate 53, line 3. Now, this is the uh, archetype or the gate coming out of the root pressure center, and it's a pressure to start a new cycle of emotional growth and development. We could all use some of that, but with Mars, the planet of energy and movement and sometimes immaturity, there's a lot of energy here. And Mars is also in a sign that's not really comfortable for him. This is the sign of the moon, and it's Cancer, and it's watery. And he's been moving retrograde since December 6th, so he can be a little passive aggressive here, maybe emotionally reactive, but he's going through a learning process. Any planet in retrograde is going through the review, reanalyze, reassess, reflect. So it's a time to reflect on our emotional energy and how he's bringing us the symbolism of starting a new cycle of development. And in that line 3 in the Rave I Ching, Mars actually fixes the detriment. And what that can mean is that Mars's energy in gate 53, line 3 is not comfortable. He's trying to work through a process to elevate consciousness, in a sense, to refine Martian energy in this cycle of development, this pressure to begin something. So I'm just sharing all that so that we can analyze this from multiple perspectives here. With so much Piscean energy, so many gates in the solar plexus activated, we're getting this invitation to learn something new about our emotional development. And a little bit triggering with that Venus half square to Uranus on Tuesday, but yet these are important conversations. So it's a great time, again, if we feel overstimulated, overwhelmed, to take those deep breaths, use our modalities that help us ground and settle into our body and our authority to understand, what am I learning about this situation? There's great support and potential for that development. Okay, let's go ahead and move the chart into Wednesday. On Wednesday, we see that moon still traveling through the sign of Scorpio, and as she's traveling through the watery sign of Scorpio, she's trining all those planets in Pisces. So she's offering emotional support in Scorpio to see possible hidden truths. Uh, Scorpio is the world of Pluto, where we can mine these hidden gems that we didn't see before. Some of this deep emotional quality could be unearthing things that we have been unaware of as of now. But with her trining these planets in Pisces, again, through all of these activations in the solar plexus, there's an opportunity for information to come forward through our conversations and observations of how we're dealing with this right now. How are we setting our boundaries? How are we getting our own nourishing? And how are we offering that to our partners? And another interesting thing about here on Wednesday, I want to point out is that as we look at the moon moving through Scorpio here at 21 degrees of Scorpio, a few hours in the morning hours on Wednesday, the moon would have trined Mars, and also trining Saturn. So we are seeing a grand trine. Now, this is a fast moving transit because the moon moves so quickly. But because Mars is such a pivotal player in this current story as he's finishing his retrograde phase, he's trining Saturn, and Saturn is in gate 22, offering the planet of wisdom, discernment, and life lessons in how we're dealing with our individual emotional expression in communion with others. And so while the moon makes this grand trine, there's a significant opportunity here to move this forward with this free-flowing supportive trine frequency. Additionally, on this noontime chart, the moon is in gate 43 with Uranus in 23. So for a large part of the day, we're getting this channel of structuring, a design of individuality. Well, again, here are some of the hidden truths that may emerge because we've got all of this solar plexus energy with the channel of intimacy, the channel of transitoriness, and Saturn, Father Time, bringing life lessons in gate 22. And the sun himself in this gate of emotional abundance or not. So just trying to sort of paint the picture for us to be aware, to not be surprised when we see this emotional quality in our life, but to recognize that we're being invited here. Chiron still traveling through gate 51 is in line 6 in the channel of initiation. Neptune, the ruler of the sign of Pisces, is in gate 25. So we're working on not only a collective opportunity to learn to move through these polarizing emotions that we're seeing across the globe right now, but on an individual basis, which is how I like to do these transit reports, we're getting a distinct individual opportunity to grow and develop as we navigate these Piscean waters of emotional connection. And let's go ahead and move into Thursday, which will be the third quarter moon. Now, the third quarter moon, the moon will be at half of her illumination in her waning phase as she's making her way back to the next new moon, which will be on February 27. So this lunar cycle may have stirred a lot of emotional waters, but as we're moving through the waning phase, now is the time for release, the time for letting go, taking the lessons that we've learned, the experiences we've been through, and finding ways to integrate them. And it's a good time again for tending to the garden of our soul. It's a good time to check the boundaries, make sure we are keeping the vermin out and adding nutrients to our soil and this kind of concept. So third quarter moon is a really good time again to just ground ourselves, to review where we've been and how we can take agency to move forward as we head to another lunar cycle. And this is a very interesting chart we're looking at for this third quarter moon. We can see the moon herself moved into Sagittarius. She's forming a square, which is what happens at a third quarter moon, with the sun in gate 55, line 3. So we have a very line 3 frequency at this third quarter moon. Line 3 is the line of adaptation, mutation, experience, and can even be fun. It's the idea that we can try a lot of different ways, that we're working towards the evolution of something, and we need to have a lot of experience to find what that is. So, in that sense, it's a very experiential oriented third quarter moon. And of course, we can see with these red lines here that third quarter moon, moon square sun, those two planets are both forming a square and a half with Mars. Now, this is a pretty intense aspect here, and it's really, yet again, highlighting the importance of what Mars is doing right now, just 3 days before turning forward. And as I was alluding to, what he's really doing is working with this pressure to start a new cycle of emotional development. So again, this is where I think this idea of awareness and really listening to our own body, listening to our other intimate connections out there, there's great support for us to understand in a sense. When I say understand, I'm also thinking about Mercury in Pisces has just moved into gate 63. Now, gate 63 is the pressure to doubt the logical nature of experiences. And Saturn had done its retrograde phase in gate 22 not very long ago. So he offered this opportunity to restructure our doubts. What we may have not thought possible before may seem possible now, or something along those lines. And so gate 63 has undergone some sort of Saturnian transformation recently, and now Mercury is there for the first time since Saturn was there, bringing the planet of communication and understanding into this refurbished gate 63, if you will. And Mercury is forming a Mercury right here at 11 degrees is forming a square with that Jupiter in gate 35. So this is another one of our first opportunities with Mercury in gate 63 to have a new doubt. Is there a doubt, or has it evolved, or how has it changed in regards to progress? In other words, what may have not seemed like progress was possible in the past when Jupiter was in retrograde, Jupiter is now bringing the abundance to move forward through this cyclical nature of experience. And with Mercury forming this square, we may have an opportunity here to gain a new understanding. What's in it for me? How do I support the other as we move through growth and development within our relationships? And yes, this Mars about to turn forward. I just think this week is a really great time to contemplate where we're at in our life with our relationships, what we're learning about them, and where they're going. And so, if this is resonating with you, maybe you've been in a relationship that's been very challenging. It doesn't feel like there's any growth. It's very stagnant right now. Following your authority, it may say it's time to leave that relationship. But one thing we can say about the solar plexus is that it's always leaning in to growth and development. And if the solar plexus feels that there's opportunity, that growth may still come, it will stick with it. This is the value and the benefit of the center. It wants us to learn, grow, and develop with emotional maturity. And so, even though we could be in a relationship that has had challenges, what the symbolism here is saying is that there's a doorway opening to another spiral, a new cycle of development. And it's really bringing this point home due to that interesting configuration between the third quarter moon squaring the sun and both of them being in a square and a half to Mars. It may have a sense of being excuse me, uncomfortable, but it's friction that leads to growth. So we'll just have to check in down the road here and see how this has worked out for all of us. But we're definitely seeing from the chart there is great symbolism around these types of energetics and conversations. And I want to mention, I didn't talk about the moon herself, but at the third quarter moon, she's in gate 34. So again, the symbolism is pointing us in a direction of awareness. With all this emotional activity and frequency and possible conflict, the moon herself at the waning phase of her symbolism is saying, gate 34. Well, this is the gate of individual power. It speaks to the sanctity of our life force energy itself. And so that's the question I'm asking myself is, what is my personal power within this relationship? Am I being drained or exhausted or losing my sense of autonomy, losing my sense of self? Or am I growing? Even though there's always challenges in relationships, am I growing from them? Am I developing as a person and tapping into a deeper sense of creativity and inspiration? Well, I think that's the value of this moon in 34 right here. An opportunity to just check in with that question. Where is my power in this relationship in regards to my sensitivity with others? And additionally, I did want to mention that Pluto is in the mix here. Pluto at 2 degrees of Aquarius, still in gate 41, line 1, is forming a sextile to the moon and a semi-sextile to the sun. That's whenever we're talking about Pluto, we're talking about death, rebirth, and transformation. And so this also is part of the greater backdrop of this storyline that I'm describing. Pluto's involved here at this third quarter moon. And he's also in what we call the start codon to begin a new cycle of experience. So again, I'm feeling like with the overall picture we're looking at, we're in the middle of some of these stories, right? We're just not to the finish line yet. So I'm encouraging patience, awareness, acute observation from the foundation of our personal authority, but we're definitely learning something here, and there will come these inflection points. Do I stay with this intimate connection with the other, or do I not? These are big questions we may be asking ourselves. But there's great support if we're directing this uncertainty inward into where is my power within this relationship? And is it being drained or supported? And I think that will be a helpful contemplation as we move through this final week of the lunar cycle. Now, as we move into Friday and Saturday, there's not a lot of distinct aspects in the wheel because we have such a concentration of planets in Pisces. So we're seeing conjunctions essentially. This very concentrated Piscean energy, and as I've mentioned, it's very illustrated in the chart with all of those solar plexus gates activated. One thing happening here on Friday is that Venus has left gate 17 and moved into gate 21. Here again, Venus in Aries is a bit challenged. It's a little aggressive for her calm, tranquil, balanced nature. And she's in the gate called the gate of the hunter or huntress, nicknamed the gate of control. So again, here we can see that if we're having a conversation that turns into an altercation, Venus can be very sensitive to want to take control in this archetype in the ego center. And I think that's again just why these transits are helpful. We can now be aware that if we start to feel really amplified, really amped up in that sense about wanting to control the other person, that is a warning light, just like in our car dashboard. Okay, I'm overheating here. Let me take a step back. Let me contemplate what's going on, check in with my inner authority here, and see how to navigate this situation. But that was the only movement there on Friday that might bring again a little bit of Venusian spice to to this particular archetype. And as we move into Saturday, same thing here. Not a lot. Well, the one aspect that would be happening both Friday and Saturday is that as the moon was traversing through the sign of Sagittarius, she's going to be squaring all those planets in Pisces, again adding to this possible irritation or just bumping up against a bit of friction in our conversations with others, but all of those being great opportunities to step back and become aware of what is actually actually taking place. This is, I would say, as I'm going through this and sharing this week, it's not a good week to be out in front of ourselves, right? Not a great week to be barreling ahead without our authority on board, right? To be a little more just aware. There's just tremendous emotional frequency imbued in everyone right now as we're all doing the best that we can to deal with what is on our plate. Also, let me go ahead and move into Sunday here. Okay, on Sunday. Now, it's on Sunday that Mars is going to turn forward. Now, it's not, I'm showing a noontime chart, and you'll see that Mars is showing red and retrograde at 17 degrees exact. He actually begins his forward movement later in the early evening on Sunday. But while that's happening, so, certainly for the day on Sunday here, he is forming an exact partile trine to that Mercury. And I mentioned, well, I didn't mention this yet, but Mercury has left gate 63 and moved into gate 22, which is where Saturn is. So we have both Mercury and Saturn in this gate of emotional expression with others. It's individual. It's based on mutation and creative inspiration. And so this is where I really like this trine with Mars right as he's starting to move forward in that gate 53. It's just symbolizing that there is an offering here, and the offering is to gain deeper awareness, a deeper connection to how I am emotionally expressing my personal intimate self with others, and how are those conversations going? What have I learned from the past that I can now bring into the present to support these relationships? And the stability and free-flowing nature of that trine with Mars is saying, okay, he's beginning this forward movement through Cancer. Right. And as he goes through Cancer, this will be the third time that he's traversed this chart. And Cancer being the sign of home, family, mother, family relationships. So real opportunity for progress with Mars forward movement over these coming weeks. Additionally, Jupiter in that gate 35, moving forward. So yeah, we may be sensing that there's an opportunity to progress within this emotional development within the relationship, or when that solar plexus has decided there's nothing left here, it's purely stagnant, it may pull away. But these are the types of questions we may be facing as we close out this last week of the lunar cycle. We'll be having a new moon in Pisces on the 27th, so I look forward to checking back in with everybody at that time. And until then, I wish you a wonderful week, a beautiful emotional week. This solar plexus, yeah, it can be spicy, as I said. It can get us into trouble sometimes with the volatile nature of our emotional connections, but the beauty of it, the experience that it brings, it is where we find the joy of life itself in terms of food, sex, relationships, experience. It's why we're here. And so just to remember that as we go through the ups and downs that the ocean brings us, we are on a voyage of discovery, and this week is packed with opportunity to learn the next step in our stories. So thank you so much for being here. Again, please check out our course, Awaken, at emergebydesign.net. And until next week, have a great day. Bye for now.